Morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, your Sunday morning news and talk show for the Hoosier State without all that bad faith BS. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got a great show today. It's been a very busy week in the news. I've got a fantastic panel here coming up. Before that, just a little bit of housekeeping. Be sure you're subscribed to Project Next on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, all the platforms. If you're watching live, be sure to hit that bell or whatever icon you got on your screen there to get notifications from Project Next. And while you're following, be sure to follow me at Who's Left on all the social media sites. That's it for our housekeeping this week. Let's welcome in my fantastic panel. First, back from last week, Scott Johnson.
Hey.
You moving in or what, bud?
I'm trying. I like what you guys are doing.
Appreciate ya. Also welcoming back to the show is Bartholomew County Democratic Party Chair Ross Thomas. Ross, welcome.
Morning.
Oh, man, it looks like a bunch of old bearded white guys on the screen. Let's break up this sausage fest with somebody I've really been wanting to collaborate with for a long time. Welcome. First timer, the recovered Republican. Thank you, Brianna Newhart. Brianna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad to have you here. You're putting out such good stuff.
Well, thank you so much.
So, team, let's talk about this week in the news. We're going to start here right in Indiana with a little trip around the headlines I like to call Around the Corn. So, first thing this week, we all saw Vice President J.D. Vance was in the state on Thursday to meet with Mike Braun and at the state legislature regarding gerrymandering. That is our one big thing this week, and we're going to cover that in the final segment of the show. Spend the whole segment on gerrymandering, Texas, Indiana, and beyond. Also in Indiana this week, last Sunday, Beto O'Rourke, the former Texas congressman and presidential candidate, was in Indianapolis, maybe gearing up for another run here in 2028. Also, Indiana state agencies are outlining spending cuts in pursuit of a 5% reserve. Now, this is the May revenue forecast, which was very grim, prompted lawmakers to cut the budgets of most state agencies by 5% and then authorize those agencies to withhold another 5%. So we're starting to see the first batch of those spending plans this week. Also, FSSA, the Social Security Administration here in the state, is planning an aggressive new budget method to control the growing Medicaid costs. Check out this stat. In 2023, the state contributed nearly $3 billion, or about 16% of FSSA's budget. In 2025, it was $4 billion, or about 21% of the budget. Going forward, the agency will work backward by assuming the state will only contribute 2%. So that is a huge, huge cut to Medicaid, which we've been talking about a lot here. And I want to pause real quick in these headlines and see if any of you folks have comments on these drastic Medicaid cuts. I'm going to start with you there, Ross.
Well, it's a train wreck. You know, the plane is about to crash into the mountain, both with the state's budget being in disarray and the massive federal cuts that will kick in next year. That's one of the things about the big allegedly beautiful bill is that most of the real pain kicks in after the election next year, or after people have decided who they're going to vote for. But I think we're seeing something right here. Look, the state, we keep cutting taxes and capping taxes and losing sources of revenue. It's just simple math. If you don't have the revenue, and then you've been relying on the federal government to fill the gaps, and then suddenly the federal government says they won't. it's going to be a disaster. And I mean, I don't say that hyperbolically. It's going to be a disaster. People are going to die.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we're going from 20% of the budget to 2% of the budget. The federal government says, okay, this thing's going to be up to the states. We're going to rely on you to bear more of the load. This is quite the opposite of that. Moving on in quick headlines this week. So the Indianapolis City Council is one step closer to shortening curfew hours for young people in downtown Indianapolis. This story is from WFYI. At a meeting Wednesday night, the city's Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee passed an amended version of the curfew proposal, which now heads to the full council with a recommendation to pass. Now, state law allows this, moving curfew by up to 2 hours when conditions necessitate it for public safety, but it is only a temporary measure, and the curfew hours are designed to expire after 120 days unless the council renews them. The state already has a statewide curfew, but the proposal for Marion County would shorten that to 9 o'clock on weekdays for 15 to 17-year-olds and 11 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. Brianna, you're in Indianapolis, right?
I am.
What do you think of this?
I mean, I think that there were a lot of issues with teenagers running wild downtown and getting into trouble. And we've seen a huge uptick just in the last few years of teenage gun violence. And so I do think that the city needs to do something. We do need to do something. Is a curfew enough? I don't think so. I think that we need positive programming, things for these kids to do, like community centers and things like that. I think that just giving a curfew is not enough, but it's a good start.
Yeah, for sure. But the curfew's certainly not going to get the guns out of the kids' hands.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, so now you really have to wonder how much it'll help. I don't know. It's something to try, and you got to try something. So also up in the region this week, a former Porter County jail officer was charged with trafficking drugs to an inmate. And finally, the state introduced this week a new blackout license plate for an extra $90. Scott, you getting that blackout plate?
Not on your life. I mean, I get it. It's a way to raise revenue, but it feels kind of like it feels, I don't know. It's a vanity tax, I guess.
I worry that this thing is like you know how American Eagle and Steak and Shake have sort of coded fascism into their branding. I wonder if this black license plate is just going to be like a fascist calling card. I don't know. That's where I think this thing is going. But
that makes sense.
Hey, speaking of fascism in Indiana, let's move to our top stories in the state this week, where Kristi Noem has dubbed the new ICE housing at the Miami Correctional Facility outside of Peru, Indiana, dubbing it the Speedway Slammer. So this facility is due to hold up to 1,000 detainees after Mike Braun struck a deal with the Trump administration. This from The Guardian, quote, ICE will be housing detainees at the Miami Correctional Center, a prison run by the Indiana Department of Corrections. The move is part of the U.S. government's rapid expansion of immigration jails after Donald Trump's sweeping spending bill allotted roughly $170 billion to ICE, an extraordinary sum, making the agency the most heavily funded law enforcement department within the federal government. And I want to say that might be a combined sum greater than all of the other law enforcement departments in the federal government. So, first of all, the Speedway Slammer name. I want to start, Scott. I came to you last the first pass here, so I'm going to start with you first this time. Just what do you think of this idea of us giving concentration camps cute names?
Well, I mean, I think when you're trying to get away with something, giving it a cute name is a nice branding touch, right? It justifies selling merch. It makes people feel, if you're on that side of the fence, makes people feel like, oh, they're doing the right thing. But talk about appalling. I mean, even Hitler didn't try and brand Auschwitz, right? I mean, what the hell?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and they say it's for immigration, but it's not going to be just for immigration. It's going to be for anyone who's against the administration.
Well, yeah, we already know from Florida that, their quote unquote alligator Alcatraz concentration camp down there, that a great number of the people in that facility have no criminal record whatsoever.
Yep.
And the ones that do are often a very minor violation, like a traffic stop or parking ticket or something stupid. These are not full of violent criminals.
No, and let's not forget that an immigration violation is still legally a civil matter.
Yes.
And I don't recall where civil matters ever justified prison sentences anytime in the past.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to this in here shortly when we talk about Micah Beckwith and his comments regarding due process for immigrants. But, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, and the way they use these cute nicknames for these facilities. And it very much reminds me of like the 1920s when lynching was common in this country. And the white folks would pack up a picnic and go sit on the hill and watch the rest of the townspeople string a guy up. And they would send postcards and make it a day out on the town, commemorate it. It was gross. And frankly, I don't know, Brianna, you tell me, is buying yourself a alligator Alcatraz t-shirt the same as getting a lynching postcard?
I think it is. I think that, the conditions that they have down there in the Florida swamp, this is just a tent. This has no insulation, no real protection from the outside elements. I mean, it floods in there. And I know it's not on our list, but that ex-employee just came out saying how horrible the conditions are, even for the corrections officers. And it's just, to me, it's sick. And it's glorifying the inhumane treatment of humans. And we're all humans, and we're treating these humans worse than we treat animals. And that's not okay. So why are we glorifying it? Why are we making merch out of it? It's just not right.
Yeah, it really it cheapens the whole thing. It turns it into a gross spectacle, and we're talking about people's lives here. So this whole Speedway Slammer branding drew condemnation from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, of all places. So this is from the Indy Star. So Penske Entertainment, which owns the Speedway, says, quote, "We were unaware of plans to incorporate our imagery as part of the announcement. Consistent with our approach to public policy and political issues, we are communicating our preference that our intellectual property not be utilized moving forward in relation to this matter." End quote. So the company fell short of publicly demanding any sort of retraction or issuing a formal cease and desist order to prevent the future use of their imagery or the use of the Speedway term. We should note that in October of 2019, just over a week before it was announced that Penske would purchase the Motor Speedway and the IndyCar Series, that Roger Penske received the Medal of Freedom from President Trump in his first term. These guys sounds like are kind of buddy-buddy. Ross, boy, that's got to put Penske in a tough situation, huh?
Well, yeah, they created graphics an Indy car, an ICE Indy car with the number 5, which for people who follow racing currently, the number 5 is Pato Award, who is the only Mexican driver on the circuit. Maybe they had no idea, but certainly the imagery is I think look, we've gotten to the point where a lot of corporate America, and particularly if you're in the entertainment industry, if you take a side like that and are soft on fascism, that's going to be bad for your bottom line. Even in Indiana, that's going to be bad for your bottom line. So it will be interesting to see. Of course, we've seen, you know, uh, at one point, certainly, I think you could say that Jeff Bezos and others have been willing to take the hit in order to curry favor. But certainly, the other thing that I wanted to add about Miami Correctional Facility, I've been a lawyer for 30 years, criminal defense lawyer, so I've been to that facility many, many, many times. It is They are not building a facility there. That it has had empty beds since they built it. It's kind of an indictment of the prison industrial complex that we built this giant prison on the Grissom Air Force Base property, and then didn't have enough funding to fully fill it. So it's had empty beds since it was built, essentially. And I would also add, it is one of the worst. So it's not going to be a tent city, but it is one of the worst facilities in the state in terms of violence, in terms of health. And you would think a relatively new facility would be better than that, but we're putting these folks in one of our worst facilities, and I can't imagine that adding people to it is going to be better. But yeah, the whole thing just kind of shows you that Indiana is seen as a lapdog for the Trump administration, and with our governor, with our legislature, um, with all of these issues, you can look to Indiana and say, well, they're going to do whatever we tell us, so we can just go there, as a default.
Ain't that the truth? And we're going to come back to that again and again in this episode about Indiana being a laboratory of autocracy and dominated by Trump sycophants in the executive and legislative branches. So the Trump administration says they're standing by this branding, saying, quote, an AI-generated image of a car with ice on the side doesn't violate anyone's intellectual property rights. Any suggestion to the contrary is absurd. And it says DHS will continue promoting the Speedway Slammer as a comprehensive and collaborative approach to combating illegal immigration. So my question for all of you, before we move on from this story, we've all decided Speedway Slammer is both insulting and a stupid name. I've heard the Alligator Alcatraz facility more accurately perhaps referred to as Alligator Auschwitz. What more representative name would you give the Speedway Slammer? Brianna, I hate to put you on the spot and make you go first, but what do you got?
Oh my goodness. I have not, I mean, I think that just calling it what it is would be good, which is a concentration camp. And I think that we should just call a spade a spade.
The Cornfield Concentration Camp.
Yep, there you go. I think that'd be a more accurate description.
Yeah, maybe you could even spell it with K's instead of C's.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's perfect.
Scott, you got one?
Given our history in the state with the KKK, a Red Fire in the Heartland, Cornfield Concentration Camp with 3 Ks. Perfect. It's true to Indiana's heritage.
Ross?
I think that's it. Absolutely, that's a home run. Congratulations. That is it.
Yeah, I was going to go with Tippecanoe Treblinka.
I would say poll the audience. Let them cast their votes.
There we are. We're gonna come. Yeah, what's the word I'm looking for? We're going to begin a poll here after the show and see if we can find something out. Yeah, it sucks, but we gotta, I guess, laugh at the horror that is taking place right under our nose. So, hey, speaking of the horror taking place right under our nose, the Micah Beckwith Scandal Factory keeps pumping out the hits. This week, our guy Micah in the news with at least 2 scandals. So we're going to start with the first one here earlier in the week. So, during a town hall in Terre Haute, Micah Beckwith said, quote, undocumented immigrants don't have a right to see a judge. They're here illegally. Ross, you're a criminal defense attorney. Does that comport with the Constitution?
Well, obviously not. It clearly does not, and it also doesn't comport with basic common sense. And I've had this conversation with numerous people about how due process works, and it's one of those knee-jerk things that I think a person who doesn't think about it or doesn't really get it, say, well, yeah, they're illegal. If you came here illegally, why do you want protection now? But when you ask the question, well, if they come for you and say that you are illegal, how are you going to, well, I'm a citizen, I have rights. How are you going to assert those rights? Well, I'm going to tell the judge. That, sir, is due process.
Yep.
So if a guy without a name, without a badge, wearing a mask comes to you and says, you're here illegally, or just you're coming with me, and we say, hey, you don't have any rights because we've decided you're illegal. I mean, that's where we get to it. Who decided? Some kid who just got hired by ICE decided. So it's very circular, and you can see people's brains go. It's like, well, I would prove I have a birth certificate. I don't have anything to worry about. But of course you do, because you have to be able to present that evidence yourself. So Micah Beckwith is an idiot. He's not qualified to talk about these kind of things. He's just not, even though I don't think due process is a particularly complicated legal concept, but it's clearly over his head. So yeah, it's very disturbing. And I mean, I've said publicly with something like this, if this isn't the kind of thing that scares you, I mean, in very real Orwellian terms, that someone can just be grabbed off the street based on what Christy Nome decided, and that's the end. You're going to the gulag. It should scare the hell out of everybody. But yeah, really disturbed by it. I think everybody should be outraged by it, both by the fact that Micah Beckwith is a fascist, but also that he is an idiot.
Yeah, it's funny for somebody who is both an elected official and a pastor. He doesn't seem to understand a whole lot about either the Constitution or the Bible. So the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution reads, in part, quote, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law." Now, tell me if I'm wrong. I think, Brianna, what this essentially is doing is stating that they, Beckwith, Trump, Braun, these fascists, don't think that these undocumented people are persons.
I think that's how you'd have to read it, because otherwise they'd be protected by the Constitution, which they are. And the Supreme Court has upheld this twice. So I don't understand, like Micah Beckwith, he is the special kind of village idiot, if you will, because he cannot figure out how to Google anything, because this literally takes 3 seconds to Google. And unless he is classifying people who are undocumented not as humans, there's no way to interpret this. The Supreme Court has ruled, and it's very obvious to the rest of us, that due process is afforded to everyone, regardless of citizenship. So that's the only way this makes logical sense, is if they are considering people who are undocumented not human.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, Micah Beckwith doesn't need Google. He gets his answers directly from God. And apparently, God told him that this would be a good comeback during this town hall. Beckwith says, so when the Japanese were bombing Pearl Harbor, did we give them due process to actually see a judge? They invaded our country. Illegal migrants who have broken our laws and crossed into our country illegally do not receive constitutional due process rights merely for invading our soil. If that were true, that would mean if Russia invaded Alaska, Russian soldiers would be required to receive constitutional rights also. This is absurd. Constitutional rights are not bestowed upon individuals simply because their feet are on our soil. Scott, why is that horseshit?
So the reason why this is horseshit, it ties into the broader agenda. Trump is an old school racist. Beckwith and Braun clearly fall into the same categories, and they're using this as a way to justify anyone who doesn't look like one of us on this podcast as going to a gulag. And the way you do this is, this is straight out of Goebbels, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda playbook. Is you pick a villain and you demonize them. And that's how you do it. This is how you get people to show up for lynching parties. It's horseshit. It's illegal. It's against the Constitution. And with Trump having now spent, 180 days violating the Constitution, it clearly isn't worth the paper that it was scrawled on.
Yeah, for sure. And
that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it so that everyone in the country looks like one of us. And I'm sorry, my America is diverse. My America has all ethnicities, all genders, all persuasions of religion. I'm sorry, that's what we built this country for. That's why we have that statue in New York Harbor.
And it sounded to me like he was defending Japanese internment camps during World War II.
He absolutely was.
Suggesting that was something we should be doing again. Like, he's talking about Russian soldiers. Those are soldiers. But we're talking about, a military invasion. It's not the same as people seeking refuge in another country. It is absurd. It is offensive. It is racist.
We also have a set of rules, the Geneva Convention, for example, which we've signed on to. We also have the Code of Military Justice. Look, yes, a captured Russian soldier in Alaska has rights. We cannot shoot him in the head and throw him in a ditch. We can't. So even that, I was kind of waiting for Micah Beckwith to go, Bluto from Animal House and ask if it was over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. But no, it's ridiculous. But even there, yes, I don't want to keep quoting movies, but this isn't Nam Smokey. There are rules, and even there, he's wrong. So try as he might to justify fascism, that's not what we have. I hope. And the biggest fear is we have a U.S. Supreme Court that continues to surprise us again and again and again as just how far they are willing to go. And it can be a gamble for these folks to say, look, we know it's unconstitutional, but the Constitution is whatever the Supreme Court says. And I think, 2 years ago, if you would have said the president of the United States has complete immunity, even if he murders someone, you would have said, well, that's not true. That's ridiculous. But that's the law of the land today. So that should also give us pause.
Yes. Speaking of being above the law, our lovely super Christian lieutenant governor's office this week also was roiled in controversy as officials in the LG's office were accused of watching a lewd AI video of a lawmaker's wife. The lawmaker in question is State Rep Craig Haggard of House District 57. He and his wife are pictured there for those of you watching. Now, let me give you a little backstory here. So last Friday, Beckwith senior advisor Aaron Sheridan was abruptly terminated after refusing a request to resign. She says she was never written up, never reprimanded, never told there were any performance issues. She was simply asked to resign and said no, and then was fired, according to a statement she gave to Abdul Hakim Shabazz of Indie Politics. Now, Sheridan is a longtime Republican operative, deep ties to the state legislature, has been one of Beckwith's most visible and engaged staffers. But behind the scenes, sources say tensions were growing between professional governance and performative politics. When asked why she hadn't come forward with allegations of internal dysfunction, Sheridan said, quote, "I did report all the wrongdoings and advise them to abide by policies, but they wanted someone who was willing to shake the boat, and he'll have a church pay his ethics fines," end quote. Apparently there's more to come on that, but not at this moment. So after this firing, we get details coming out of the office that a couple of Beckwith's staffers played this video showing Haggard's wife topless, and apparently this is an AI fake of performance she gave at a state talent show for mental health awareness on April 9th, excuse me. That's where that picture that we were showing was taken. So the staffers in question are Greg Pulse, the Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief Ethics Officer, LOL, and Devin Norick, a lawyer on contract with the office. And apparently they watched this on April 10th and had a good laugh at it. And apparently so did the Lieutenant Governor himself. Now, a second person familiar with the video described concerns raised among women on Beckwith's staff. So this is not just this video. There's other stuff. Apparently, Pulse had made comments about women's bodies in the office with other staffers. And one of the lawmakers' wives urged one of Beckwith's other staffers to file a formal complaint. A person familiar with the events inside the lieutenant governor's office characterized it as sexual harassment. So, I got some more details here. We'll sprinkle those in. But first, Scott, I just want to get your impressions of this entire scandal.
Well, I mean, I think that it's really clear. Earlier this year, Trump signed the Take It Down Act, which explicitly addresses AI porn, and all the people involved should be getting 2 years in prison, right? Period, the end. It's the law of the land, and quite honestly, Andre Carson voted for it. And I confirmed that with Andre himself earlier this year. So I don't agree with the bill. I think it's excessive, but if we've got it, let's put people on Beckwith's staff and Beckwith himself, since he frickin' watched it, put him in jail. Period, the end. Real simple.
Yeah, and we'll wind up posting the text of the bill in the show notes later, so folks can kind of make the decision whether it's appropriate or not strong enough or too strong or whatever. But like you said, the Take It Down Act became law in May, right? This makes the non-consensual publication of either authentic or deepfake sexual images a felony. It is also against Indiana law to distribute, post without consent, intimate images depicting sexual content or nudity, either, real or created using AI. So, this is against the law, right? Ross, do you, like I said, you're a lawyer. Do you think these guys have some jail time coming?
Well, I'm sure if they're charged, they're going to expect and demand due process. I would tell you that. Um, so yeah, look, I think in a normal world that we live in, that is a question that um, we have a process for answering. If people have committed crimes or are alleged to commit crimes, we charge them with a crime. Um, they are given the right to defend themselves. They're given a lawyer if they can't afford one, and they're judged by a jury of their peers. And if that happens, that happens, and I hope it does. Um, I think, I think a lot of this just shows us kind of the bro culture of the modern Republican, that these guys would look at something like this and say, "Oh, that's that." I don't know if they made it. I don't know if they found it. I don't know how they came to have it, but that to think about it, whether you're in business life or political life, to see something like this and give it a thumbs up as opposed to say, "Holy cow, what do we got here? What do we do?" No, so obviously there's hypocrisy because I'm sure every one of these guys, is at the pulpit, every week, but also, we saw we saw this week that the Secretary of Defense um, uh, liked or reposted a pastor saying that women shouldn't have the right to vote, and he said that was good and that was Christian. Um, so we've gotten to I've lived in a world where saying something like that or agreeing with something like that would probably end your career that day, but that's not where we are. So when you have these guys who are aligned with, at the very least, people who think women are second class citizens who shouldn't be allowed to vote, I think it points to a much deeper rot in their world.
Well, yeah, and it's ironic though because these folks think that women shouldn't vote. Their domain is in the household, and they are creatures that need to be protected and from the outside world or whatnot. And here they are with like internet porn. I think the Bible says something about lusting after other people's wives. If I recall, I need to bone up on the book. But Brianna, as a woman, how does it make you feel that these are the kind of folks representing you in government?
Oh, well, they're not representing me. That's what it is. They are very much just representing themselves in a very small sect of white Christian males, and that is their intention. And they don't care that they're not representing us. And this just shows that there is a deeper systemic issue, and there is a long line of misogynistic things that Micah Beckwith has done and said that shows that that is a very toxic bro-like mentality in that office. And I don't think that's acceptable. I honestly think they should use the law, that I'm sorry, I'm like blanking, Take It Down Act, and use it almost like the RICO law to get this systemic misogyny out, because there's so many things you can't get these guys on. Let's get them on something that they can, because this is a consistent problem and it goes all the way to the top. We have a president with 34 felony counts. He is found liable for SA of women, and we know he's on the Epstein list. So of course, this is a huge issue, and women everywhere should be outraged because they want to act like we need protection from this mythical thing, but really we need protection against men. That's what we need protections against. And he is the person we need protections against. So he needs to be removed from office, is my opinion.
Yeah. So apparently, Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears is investigating the incident. We don't have many more details on that at this point. One place we're probably not going to get accountability from is Beckwith's boss, Mike Braun, who addressed the issue with reporters Tuesday afternoon, saying, quote, well, each state office is going to have to do its own accountability. I mean, if it were my office, there would be quick getting to the bottom of it and full accountability. Haggard, whose wife is the subject of said video, did not find Braun's comments reassuring, saying, quote, I didn't like the response from the governor's office, saying, not our problem, because I think that's a cop-out and sort of disgusting. I, for one, agree with Mr. Haggard here.
Agreed.
So, well,
I kind of thought the governor was in charge, but I guess, guess
I actually have a question. Isn't Micah Beckwith a part of Mike Braun's office? So why isn't he getting to the bottom of that?
Well, apparently each elected official's office is a separate entity, apparently. So the LG's office is not a subdivision of the governor's office. It's its own thing. He's got the agricultural purview in his responsibilities there. So just like Rokita's office is kind of its own separate thing, and Morales' office. But still, in the Indiana state government, theoretically, the buck stops at Mike Braun's desk, and maybe he can't say, well, you're fired, but he can say, I would like you to resign, or something publicly stronger than, oh, well, not my problem.
I just don't think that's an acceptable answer either from our governor when that's his lieutenant governor. You're right, the buck stops with him. So a stronger statement and a stronger action should have been taken, because I feel so bad for this woman, because that is humiliating, and for nothing to be done, I would be enraged. Personally, I'm enraged for her.
It's just not leadership from Braun. It is a total cop-out. I mean, God, dude, say something, right? So
grow a pair.
Yeah, that brings us to the close of our Indiana section of today's show, and I want to move on to zoom things out here, look at issues from across the country, and maybe a little bit of international stuff. So let's talk about our U.S. and world headlines here this week. Now, here's one. The Department of Justice has doubled the reward for the arrest of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. Federal court filing system has been hit with a sweeping hack. Now, Ross, I want to ask you about this one, but first, so the electronic case filing system used by the federal judiciary has been breached in a sweeping cyber intrusion that is believed to expose sensitive court data across multiple U.S. states. The story is from Politico. It is not immediately clear how the hackers got in, but the incident is known to affect the judiciary's federal core case management system. That's the case management electronic case files, or CMECF, which legal professionals like Ross use to upload and manage case documents, and PACER, which is the system that gives the public limited access to the same data. The hack is feared to have compromised the identities of confidential informants involved in critical cases at multiple federal district courts. Ross, as an attorney, how big of a deal is this?
Can be a really big deal. So in the CMECF system that we use in federal court, essentially all filing, and it's true in state court now too, paper, you don't go to the courthouse and mail a piece of paper or send a piece of paper. Everything is filed electronically. So that means, and some things are filed electronically under seal, which means that only those who are involved in the case, even among attorneys who can access the CMECF, wouldn't have access to those documents. So there is lots of sensitive material, both from the government, but also from defendants. You can have medical histories. You can have certainly, obviously, Social Security numbers. Identifying documents like that. But also, as is mentioned, people who have been promised anonymity as victims or as even working informants, a very big deal, potentially, because in
Yeah.
criminal cases, there is a lot of information that we've taken steps in Indiana actually to limit what is in public documents. You have to redact. You don't publish a document that has somebody's social security number in it. But we also have a system where you can file things under seal. And the problem is, if somebody hacks in, they've got access to all of it. Nothing's under seal to a hacker. So it's very, very concerning.
Oh, thanks for that information, Ross. It really helps clarify that. Moving on, also in headlines this week, Azerbaijan and Armenia have signed a peace pledge at a White House summit with President Trump. They've been fighting over this enclave called Nagorno-Karabakh since like the 80s and 90s, and there's been flare-ups of violence ever since. The White House has said that as part of the deal, the U.S. will help build a major transit corridor to the enclave that will be named the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. Iran, a neighbor to these countries, has vowed to block the corridor, saying that with or without Russia, their ally, they plan on blocking this, even though they have a strategic alliance with Russia and Armenia. So, also, this week, it has been announced that Trump will meet, speaking of Russia, with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They're going to meet in Alaska this coming Friday to discuss a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. It will be the first time leaders of the two countries have talked since 2021. Apparently, Russian officials have presented U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff with a list of ceasefire demands that include Ukraine giving up the eastern Donbas region and Crimea. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky quickly and pointedly rejected any potential deal that would involve handing over Ukrainian territory. Scott, real quick, is this summit going to put an end to that war?
No, because I don't think the Ukrainians will stop. The Ukrainians understand that Russia is an existential threat. They have no desire to stop. They have the European Union on their side. And what I think this is going to be is perhaps the U.S. stands down and stops providing aid. But I don't think the Ukrainians will stop.
Can Ukraine survive on European aid alone without U.S. aid?
I think so, because if Russia goes into Ukraine, what's to stop them? Right? This is an existential threat for the EU also. Right? And the European Union, they have solid memories of 1939. They know what having an aggressor nation on their borders is like. So
yeah, and the European Union grew out of the European Economic Cooperation Zone, which kind of grew out of NATO, which was a response to the Second World War. We tried to put systems and structures in place to avoid global war again, and we've just seen the last several years the crumbling of all of those structures, and
correct.
It really has to give you pause and worry about the next several years. So moving on from the headlines, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this guy. So pictured in our on our screen there is Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who this week canceled $500 million in funding for mRNA vaccines. This will impact 22 projects being led by major pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer and Moderna, for vaccines against bird flu and other viruses. This story from the BBC, RFK Jr. a noted vaccine skeptic, announced he was pulling the funding over claims that, quote, mRNA technology poses more risks and benefits than these respiratory viruses.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll be here all week. So this is a huge deal. It is not just one of these Doge cuts that trims a very modest amount. I mean, to us, $500 million sounds like a huge sum of money. To the government, that's nothing. Like, these mRNA vaccines are what gave us the COVID shot in record time. It saved so many people's lives. Brianna, what the hell?
Yeah, what the hell indeed. I don't know. The longer he's in office, the more I'm like, maybe he really does have a brain worm. I don't know. Because mRNA vaccines, I mean, they even during COVID, people were saying that these are new and new is scary and dangerous, which isn't true because they were researching this in 2010s. I had friends doing their doctoral work on mRNA back in 2010. Like, these are not as new as they would like you to believe, and they are very safe, and they are much faster to develop new ones, like for COVID. So this is not going to be good. I have a feeling we're going to see a huge uptick in COVID, the flu virus, and anything that travels with respiratory. It's just going to get bad. And I would expect this winter to be much worse than previous winters. And I would think that the hospitals are going to get overwhelmed, especially if some of those Medicaid cuts take effect before that time. I think that we're heading for disaster with this. And it's just really upsetting because as I am a speech language pathologist by trade, and I will say till the day I die, because it's true that vaccinations do not cause autism. We know that over 80% of autism cases are caused by genetics. The rest, the 20% that we aren't sure about, we probably just haven't found the gene related to it yet. Because if there's another cause that is contributing to your symptoms, that is not autism, that is something else. So there may be some misdiagnoses in there, but generally speaking, vaccines are safe, they are effective, and they save lives. This is going to lead to people losing their lives, and that is not okay.
And this whole vaccine cause autism thing has been debunked several times over at this point. I want to say this came from a British doctor. I want to say his name was Andrew Wakefield, published this study, 25 years ago, maybe, that showed a link between autism and vaccines. And it has been proven since then that he basically faked the data. The whole thing is made up. And yet that myth persists with folks like RFK and entirely too many other people. This mRNA vaccine, these things are a miracle of modern science. And it basically, the technology sort of allows you to like plug and play, and a new virus like COVID emerges, you can drop in the genetic material from that virus, and then the RNA vaccine that then knows how to, like, I don't even know how it works, man.
Yeah.
I'm getting myself tied in knots just trying to explain it. But so when you see something like the bird flu, which we know is circulating, amongst livestock all over the country and wild birds, it's just a matter of time before this thing maybe crosses species and winds up infecting humans and becomes a pandemic even more serious than COVID was. And we will leave ourselves completely vulnerable and unable to respond in the time that we did then going forward. It's very, very scary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I
And
think there's
that's,
another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I think that's the concern. But yeah, basically with the mRNA vaccinations, basically the difference is, I just wanted to clear it up real quick. The traditional vaccines are a dead part or a weakened part of the virus, and then they introduce that, and then your body makes the antibodies. Well, with mRNA, the mRNA is teaching your body to make the antibodies without introducing the virus into your system. So that's why it's so great. And you can plug and play so many different viruses and diseases to make fast production of a new vaccine. They are truly miracles, and we need to be investing in this, not divesting it.
If there
I
is
think the
one,
political
go ahead,
question.
Rob.
Oh,
Go ahead.
but the government question, the political question is, I don't know. I mean, I got a political economy degree over 30 years ago. Maybe I should get my money back because I thought the Congress decided what the budget was, and I thought the Congress decided where we spent money. An unelected quack should not be the guy who just arbitrarily says, we're not spending that money. The Congress gave you that money and told you to spend it. Obviously, those things are in the courts now, but it's ridiculous that we even start from this point that he would ever have the authority to just say, I'm not spending that money. So I'll trust the experts here about the value of the vaccine. But I mean, you shouldn't be able to just arbitrarily shut down the government because you're a crazy person.
Yeah, and you know what? So, speaking of crazy persons and vaccines, so along these lines, there was a story this Friday, just a couple days ago, down in Atlanta, outside of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So, this story from 11 Live out of Atlanta. A DeKalb County police officer died confronting a gunman near the Emory Atlanta campus, Emory University. It's right there next to the CDC. So police on this scene were still hearing gunfire when they arrived from a nearby CVS at the intersection across from the CDC. Police found the shooter on the second floor of said CVS, and they found him injured by gunfire. They don't know if it was a police firing or if it was self-inflicted. But so the shooter, 30 years old, had tried to get into the CDC headquarters previously, but was stopped by guards before driving across the street to the pharmacy. He was armed with 5 guns, including at least one long gun, according to officials speaking on the condition of anonymity. This guy blamed the COVID-19 vaccine for making him depressed and suicidal, according to law enforcement. Now, here's a quote from Fired But Fighting, a group of laid-off employees opposing changes to the CDC. Quote, Kennedy is directly responsible for the villainization of CDC's workforce through his continuous lies about science and vaccine safety, which have fueled a climate of hostility and mistrust, end quote. Who haven't I been to in a while? Scott, is it your turn?
It is my turn. It is my turn. Yep.
Well,
so
all right. Are they correct? Is this shooting on Kennedy?
Absolutely. Kennedy has made a lifetime out of going after pharmaceutical companies and claiming vaccines are responsible for all kinds of things that they actually aren't. Bear in mind that we've been administering vaccines now since I believe the 1700s when we first made a smallpox vaccine out of cowpox, right?
George Washington inoculated his troops. Yes.
So it's not like this is new, right? And I get that COVID was horrible. I get it. I was there. I ran a COVID tracker during COVID, right? So I was there. However, the simple truth of the world of it is it was a pandemic. It happened. Big deal. Get the hell over it. But Kennedy, with his relentless demonization of vaccines and science, he's out there providing a reason for every nut job to shoot. This is entirely on RFK. And I'm going to make my final statement about RFK, which is the same one I always use, which is that his father and his uncle would be appalled, and he should be ashamed. The man needs to step down. He should never have been in that role.
I saw a great headline from The Onion this week. It said, Kennedy curse sure taking its sweet time with RFK Jr. And Man, it is a weird world we live in where the Onion may be our most accurate news source. So, moving on in other stories this week. So, let's talk about the economy for a little bit. The other day, on the 7th, I believe that was Thursday, if I can count, Trump's new tariffs have gone into effect, just as the U.S. economy is showing signs of strain. So, this from the Associated Press. Donald Trump began imposing higher import taxes on dozens of countries Thursday, just as the economic fallout of his months-long tariff threat has begun to cause visible damage to the U.S. economy. Just after midnight, goods from more than 60 countries and the European Union became subject to tariff rates of 10% or higher. Products from the EU, Japan, and South Korea, all allies, mind you, are taxed at 15%, while imports from Taiwan, another ally, Vietnam, and Bangladesh are taxed at 20%. On Wednesday, Trump announced an additional 25% on tariffs to be imposed on India because of its purchases of Russian oil, bringing its total import taxes to 50%. But wait, there's more. The Swiss executive branch was expected to meet Thursday after President Karen Keller-Sutter and other Swiss officials returned from a hastily arranged trip to Washington in a failed bid to avert a 39% tariff on Swiss goods. Your watches and chocolate are about to get more expensive. So, also, import taxes are still coming on pharmaceutical drugs, and Trump announced 100% tariffs on computer chips that could leave the U.S. economy in a place of suspended animation as it awaits the impact. All of this occurring under Trump's use of a 1977 law to declare an economic emergency. This very use of this clause is under legal challenge. So, in a way, as like what Ross was saying about Kennedy not really being empowered to make the changes that he is doing single-handedly, Trump is not actually empowered to make these tariff changes single-handedly, but he's doing it under an emergency declaration. So, Ross, I want to go to you here. Economy not looking great. I think we talked about this a little bit last week. We're headed into a recession, aren't we?
Well, it certainly looks that way. I mean, the jobs numbers are not good. Bankruptcies are up. I mean, that's an indicator that doesn't get reported on a lot. But if you go and look at those stats of bankruptcy filings throughout the country, those are up. These broad tariffs are bound to have a negative impact. And I will say, you know, I'm pro labor. I'm pro targeted tariffs in certain instances. I think if Japan or China is dumping steel at a loss in the United States, there ought to be a tariff. I think General Motors should have a tariff if they're going to build vehicles outside the United States with slave labor. I think Nike should have a tariff if they're going to make shoes in Vietnam with slave labor. So I'm not anti-tariff if it's targeted and used to level the playing field. But these broad country-based tariffs are ridiculous. I mean, it's a lack of understanding. Like we're going to put a tariff on, bananas from Central America when we can't grow bananas. It's insane. So, and a lack of understanding, but I'm not anti-tariff per se, and I don't want to jump on that bandwagon and say, well, it's always that. But obviously, even when you do targeted tariffs, you're going to have price shocks, and you've got to have the government step in and have price controls to offset that in the short term, or the consumer is going to get killed. And so that's what's going to happen. We don't have those protections in place. It's just, let's see what happens. Look, yeah, we are every indication is that not just the tariffs, but the lack of investment in the country. When we cut all of people, I guess, don't think about it. If you cut food stamps, yes, that hurts that family that needs to eat. That also hurts the grocery store. Believe me, that SNAP money spends just like my debit card. And if you take that money out of the economy, it is going to cause a huge problem. And I think people don't see it that way. So yeah, there's no reason to be optimistic about any of that.
Yeah, Trump didn't pay very much attention at Wharton. His entire outlook on economic policy is like straight out of the 1890s, and completely transactional. For example, look at this. So Trump is also abandoning core pillars of U.S. strategy toward China in pursuit of a legacy-defining trade deal with Xi Jinping. This from Axios. So. Trump has accused India of fueling the Russian war machine, right? We talked about this 50% tariffs on India now. Well, China, the world's top importer of Russian oil, has so far escaped similar punishment. Trump administration reversed its ban on NVIDIA selling its AI chips to China. It told Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te to cancel a planned stopover in New York this month. Trump's relationship with Modi could result in a cancellation of this year's Quad summit between the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. And the Pentagon is also reviewing whether to continue AUKUS, a Biden-negotiated defense pact between Australia, the U.K., and the U.S., involving nuclear-powered submarines. So, and Trump has also defied a bipartisan U.S. law requiring TikTok to be sold or banned. Brianna, is Trump turning toward China?
I don't know if Trump knows what he's doing, to be completely honest. I don't think that this is like some grand plan. I think he is just throwing stuff to see what sticks at the wall. Like, I don't think that this is like some master plan. I just don't think that he is qualified for the position he's in, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And the people around him are just yes people, so they're not going to tell him the correct way to do it when he could just literally just, I don't know, watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off and learn what happens when you tariff an entire country in general. But yeah, I don't know if he's going towards China or not. It just, I don't think that we know what he's thinking, because he keeps going in and coming back out again. So we'll see what happens.
I will say this, and like, by all means, everybody knows I'm not a fan of anything Trump does, but I have been arguing for a while that the U.S. should try to cultivate a better relationship with China. That's the only way I think that we're going to make any dent in climate change over the next several decades. China is the worldwide leader in renewable energy at this point, and Russia is very much the center of the global like fossil fuel industry. And I think we need to split those two from each other to have any chance going forward. I don't know if Trump's that thoughtful.
Yeah, that's my point, is that I don't think he can be that think that far ahead. And I don't think anyone in his administration is going to tell him to do anything. So it just seems like he's just doing things day by day and doesn't really think about what the consequences or benefits of anything is.
Yeah, for sure. And so, listen, I got one other thing I wanted to talk about in the economy here that I saw this week, and that is from Reuters. U.S. companies are spending record amounts to protect executives as threats rise. We all remember the Luigi Mangione story from several months ago when he murdered the CEO of United Healthcare. So, in response to that and other things, there was a shooting last week or the week before in New York, where a guy was apparently trying to target the NFL offices and wound up going into a different office and killing people. So corporations have doubled the number of plainclothes security teams outside of buildings in New York City, and median spending on executive security for top officers, including CEOs, CFOs, and others, rose 16% to a record $106,000 last year, which, according to new data, which reviewed financial filings for the 500 largest U.S. public companies by revenue. Boy, $106,000 on security seems like a bargain when you're not paying your taxes and you're ripping people off left and right and making billions and billions of dollars in profit. Scott, am I seeing things right there?
Yeah, you are seeing things right. These companies that are that are scared, they're scared for a reason, right? Like there's no question in my mind that that the US law provides an incentive to basically treat your customers horribly, right? They can get away with it. There are no guidelines. Everything is structured so that they can get away with it. So it's a cheap investment. It's a cheap investment to keep that stock price up, to keep those incredible executive compensation plans in place. And what the US really needs is compensation, is a change in tax policies where we go back to Roosevelt era taxation policies, where anything above a certain threshold is taxed at the 90% level. We do that, we start to address the gap between rich and poor. We've dealt with this once before.
They wouldn't need the security if we weren't all really, really pissed at them for hoarding all of the country's wealth. I do want to move on from the economy here and talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel and Gaza this week. So Benjamin Netanyahu announced a plan to occupy Gaza City. Now, there was a cabinet meeting. Netanyahu said he wanted Israel to control all of Gaza, but this plan that they announced only includes Gaza City. Still, we're talking about an occupation, a siege. Reports in Israeli media suggest there were heated exchanges with the army's chief of staff, who voiced his strong opposition to a full takeover of Gaza. Now, Israel already controls 75% of the enclave, while the UN estimates some 86% of it is either in a militarized zone or under evacuation orders. So this is just another step in a already near complete occupation. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the escalation wrong and says it will bring only more bloodshed. On Friday, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz said his government will not approve any exports of military equipment to Israel that could be used in Gaza until further notice. This follows last week when Canada followed France and the UK with plans to recognize a Palestinian state, joining 147 of the UN's 193 member states in formally recognizing a Palestinian state. So, Brianna, to me, it looks like the rest of the world is kind of starting to finally break with the U.S. and Israel regarding this horrible war. Do you see that too?
Yeah, and I think that that's going in the right direction because, I mean, this whole war is about trying to bring around the end of the world because Christians believe that if they control Gaza, that's when Jesus will return. So they're trying to force this to happen, despite the fact that I'm like, I thought your God was all powerful, so why does he need your help to get Gaza? But I think that the world is waking up and realizing that, and I'm glad to see that because I mean, this is genocide is what it is. It's plain and simple, and it needs to stop, and the Israelis need to stop.
Is this too little too late? I mean, my God, we've seen all the horrific pictures coming out of Gaza the last couple of weeks. The Israelis are intentionally starving this population.
Well, it's been too little too late. I mean, look, Israel's been violating international law in Palestine for decades. and the United States has always given them a pass with our veto at the UN. And I think what we're finally seeing is, look, it should not be about um, you know Jews versus Muslims and that kind of thing. It's about a fascist government in Israel, not about who's Jewish and who's not. And I think for too long, the government of Israel has really overplayed that card to say, well, anybody who criticizes Israel is a Nazi, is an anti-Semite. Um, and that, I think we're seeing cracks in that where people are finally drawing a distinction. I mean, I'm not a religious person. I don't care what your religion is. Good for you. So I don't have any feeling one way or the other about what your religion is. But I know a fascist when I see one, and Benjamin Netanyahu is one. So I think we're finally seeing a break where people are willing to step up and say, look, this is just wrong. Um, I would, I would hope that at some point the people of Israel would finally get rid of this guy. I mean, he's been hanging on by a thread for years in a coalition government. He's under indictment, much like Trump. He's gotten out of it by continuing to keep this coalition together. But ultimately, it's this government, it's this fascist government under Netanyahu that has to go. But I do think we're finally seeing some cracks where people are willing to criticize genocide. It shouldn't be that hard, I would think, to criticize genocide without worrying about, this sort of knee jerk, oh, well, you must hate Jews if you don't like Ben Netanyahu. So I mean that's a positive, but man, it's definitely too little too late.
Yeah, for sure. And well, like you said, a fascist when you see one. So let's move from the fascist Netanyahu in Israel to fascism here at home. And you like that logo? Yeah. So Monday, and we've got several stories that just highlight the growing consolidating fascism in this country. And first of all, Monday, Rachel Maddow says, "We are here already." And to quote her, she says, "We have crossed a line. We are in a place we did not want to be, but we are there. The thing we were all warning about for the last few years is not coming. It is here. We are in it. This is what it's like, it turns out." Maddow argued that large swaths of the country might easily overlook this downward slide as movies are still being produced, sports continue to be played, and families are just still discussing the same old issues they always have around the kitchen table at night. But also, Maddow says, life in the United States is profoundly changing. It's profoundly different than it was even 6 months ago because we do now live in a country that has an authoritarian leader in charge. Putting it more bluntly, we have a consolidating dictatorship in our country, a massive, anonymous, unbadged, literally masked, totally unaccountable internal police force that apparently has infinite funding but no identifiable leadership, acting in ways designed to instill maximum fear and use maximum force, are patrolling our country. So I guess, first of all, Brianna, is Maddow right?
I think they are right. I think Trump is acting as an authoritative dictatorship at this point. That's how he's acting. That's how Congress is allowing him to do it. That's how the Supreme Court is allowing him to do it. I mean, nobody's stopping him. There are zero checks and balances. So I don't think that anybody could not see that at this point.
Could not say that?
Not see that coming.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the examples, right? We have plenty of examples just from this week. Check this one out, Ross. Apple CEO Tim Cook slammed for bribing Trump with bizarre gift. This story is from Uniland. this week, the head of the technology company joined the president in the Oval Office to announce that Apple is adding $100 billion to the $500 billion pledge the company has made to boost its investment in U.S. manufacturing and tech training. Cook says that Apple aims to manufacture all the glass used on the iPhones and Apple Watches in Kentucky, and it seems that he is solidifying his commitment to this ongoing development with a gift, a customized glass plaque on top of a 24-karat gold stand. A user on X saying, quote, Tim Cook showed up with a made-up award, praised Trump on camera to placate him, and walked out with a tariff exemption, end quote. Ross, again, it's good to have a lawyer on panels like these. Definitionally, that sure looks like bribery to me.
Well, it's the emoluments clause, if nothing else. I mean, you're not supposed to accept gifts of any kind. Look, I'm all for investment in the United States. Good for them, but they're President Biden gave us the CHIPS Act, which was really more responsible for that investment than anything Trump's ever done. But heaven forbid we ever mention that again. No, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you see, not only he's giving him the gift, but I don't know if you probably have, you've probably all seen the way he has remodeled the Oval Office to be
so
covered with fake gold. And it's ridiculous, like a tin pot, dictator. No, it's pathetic. I think for all of these people, at a certain point, history moves on. And if you're going to be remembered as somebody who kowtowed to a fascist, guess what? 100 years from now, you're going to be lumped in as a fascist. There's not going to be any nuance. There's not going to be any nuance. You either were with them or against them. Hey, I'm not a Nazi. I just went to Hitler's birthday party. I'm sorry, you're a Nazi. So, I think it's sad. I think it's people driven by money and not anything else. And I think history is going to judge them really, really harshly.
Listen, Hitler could throw a great party. He had the best methamphetamine. I kid, of course, but listen. Here's another example of other fascist shit this week. So here, the Justice Department is launching a grand jury probe of New York Attorney General Letitia James, who won a civil fraud case against Trump and his companies in 2023, resulting in millions of dollars in penalties linked to fraud allegations. Apparently, the DOJ is seeking more information from James about the suit and appears to be operating under a theory that she may have deprived Trump and his adult children of their rights as part of that case. Meanwhile, in other, I would say, administrative fuckery, an appeals court has blocked contempt proceedings against the Trump officials over deportations. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for D.C. was split 2-1, with two Trump appointees in the majority and an Obama appointee dissenting. This decision overturns Chief Judge James Boasberg's finding of probable cause that Trump officials could be held in criminal contempt over flights that removed alleged gang members from the U.S. after Boasberg had ordered the Trump administration to halt the deportations. Scott, typical fascist regime stuff, right? Yeah.
Typical fascist stuff, right? Like this is their
opponents. Yeah,
there's a playbook here.
100%.
No.
And finally, and this one we're going to have to wait for tomorrow for more details, but this is potentially really scary stuff. Trump taps federal law enforcement agencies to police DC. Yep. This from NPR. The surge in federal policing in the city began just after midnight on Friday and is expected to last 7 days with the option to extend enforcement as needed. I bet they decide it's as needed for quite a while going forward. Trump announced these plans on Truth Social for a Monday press event and took to social media earlier this week saying crime in the district is out of control and repeated his threats to exert federal control of local government. newsflash, it's not DC. It's coming everywhere. But show some numbers. Washington, D.C. has seen a decline in violent crime over the last couple of years. In 2024, local lawmakers passed a far-reaching bill aimed at improving public safety. And now, wouldn't you know, violent crime in the city hit a 30-year low last year. And this decline is in line with nationwide trends of significant decreases in violent crime. Brianna, I think Trump's minions are the ones committing the violent crime.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? I mean, if it quacks like a fascist and it looks like a fascist, it's a fascist. It's just what it is. This is just this was coming. He was hinting at it on Truth Social for a while, and now he's doing it. And you're right. I don't think it's going to stop at DC. I do think it's going to go through all of the blue cities first, in the blue states, and then he'll probably start coming to places like Indianapolis and Bloomington. But yeah, it seems like they're just creating crime so that they can do this, or they're just lying. I mean, pick your, choose whichever one you want to believe. Both are probably true. So
yeah, well, we've seen they've got like 170, 180 billion dollar budget now for ICE. I mean, they're not going to let that go to waste. They're going to take over every city they can, and that is straight authoritarian playbook stuff. But like that is the physical manifestation of it on the streets. We haven't gotten here by accident. One of the authoritarian tricks that has gotten us to this point is gerrymandering, and that is our one big thing this week. So, on Monday, Democrats in Texas prevented their state's House of Representatives from moving forward, at least for now, with a redrawn congressional map sought by President Trump to shore up the Republicans' midterm prospects as his political standing falters. Now, this is from the Associated Press. Let's talk about that statement for a second. They know they are unpopular, right? The Republicans know if trends hold, even kinda, they are going to get routed in next year's elections. So, and we talked about this a little bit last week, Republicans in Texas convened a special session nominally to do something about the recent floods there. But what they're really doing is trying to redraw the state congressional maps mid-decade. This is outside of the norm. It is against the law. This is what censuses are for. We do redistrictings every 10 years. So, in response, Texas Democrats have done what they've done a few times over the last, couple decades maybe now, and they have gotten the hell out of Dodge to prevent the legislature from achieving a quorum. So basically, the Texas state legislature cannot conduct business without any of these Democrats there. They have absconded to Illinois under the protection of Governor J.B. Pritzker there. So let's talk about the Texas situation just a little bit really quick before we get to the Indiana portion of this story, because there is a Hoosier tie-in, unfortunately. Ross, I think it's your turn. Is this running away that the Texas Democrats have done going to keep the Texas Republicans from ramming through the new maps?
Well, I mean, I think it potentially can. I mean, it is the right strategy. It is the right thing to do. If I'm playing poker at a table and the rest of the players are cheating, I'm going to get up and leave. I'm not going to keep putting my money on the table. So they're cheating. We see, all the things we've talked about today kind of all go back to this sort of sociopathic mindset that Republicans have, that they have no qualms about cheating. They have no qualms about lying. They have no qualms about being absolute hypocrites. It's like they're not wired right. The rest of us, I don't want to win by cheating. I would not feel good about that. I don't want to lie to my family or to anyone if I can help it. I don't justify that. These people, look, they're not wired right. So to them, hey, so what? If we're going to get something out of it, we're happy to cheat. So look, I commend Governor Pritzker. I'm a big fan of Governor Pritzker, and I hope he continues to be very active going forward. I think he is a strong candidate for president, to be honest with you, and somebody that I would tend to support. And so, yeah, look, I think it may ultimately, and you also have to remember too, I'm sure there are congressmen in Texas, Republican congressmen who may not benefit from this. Look, the map is what it is. The voters are what they are, and anytime you move something to help somebody, it's going to hurt somebody else. And the idea is to hurt Democrats. But anytime you redraw the map, there may very well be Republicans who get hurt by this. So there might also be Republicans in that legislature, as I'm sure there are in Indiana, as we will probably talk about, that might not be for it too. So it may not happen.
Yeah. With a lot of these folks, you see, I mean, even going back to the big, beautiful bill and Josh Hawley with the Medicaid, right? Yeah, they always talk a big game about, oh, this is distasteful. I wouldn't do this. This offends my sensibility. And then they vote for it anyway.
Well, not if they're going to lose their seat. That's a whole different animal.
That is true, and it could backfire because, like you mentioned, the way this gerrymandering works, they're redrawing these lines. They've got all these safe seats now. So the Republicans in Texas say, okay, well, maybe we can make this seat a little less safe to add some more Republicans to this district over here, and pull that district away from Democrats in that way. But yeah, it does dilute the vote in their original district, right? Scott, we've seen in response to this shameless Texas gerrymander, California Governor Gavin Newsom, New York Governor Kathy Hochul have said, all right, fine, do it. We're going to do it too. We'll do it even bigger. Is that the right move?
I think you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You bring a gun to a gunfight. What the Republicans are doing is real simple. They are trying to position themselves so that their minority, and they are a minority within the country, has a permanent ruling class, becomes a permanent ruling class. There is a reason why the ICE budget is allocated over that 170 billion that you referenced earlier is allocated over 10 years. It's because they expect to be in power for the next decade. And the only way the Democrats are going to do it is if they, to quote you, Brianna, basically grow a pair and actually step up and really fight. It's going to require Democrats to put aside our inherent sense of fairness and and have a willingness to get dirty and extend ourselves into places where we don't want to go. And the alternative, if we don't do it, is we're going to lose in 2026, and then the Republicans have a permanent standing majority, right? And this is I mean, we all know the map, right? It's going to basically be being ruled by our southern brethren, and we know how well that went for America back in the 1860s, right? We know the consequences of that.
Gerrymandering has been around since the founding of the Republic. If you look at our graphic up there and you're like, what the hell is that thing? That's the original political cartoon saying that Massachusetts governor or rep or whatever, Elbridge Gerry, his district was shaped to look like a salamander. Apparently that's what salamanders looked like in the 1700s. But really, back then it was kind of gamesmanship, but in the last couple decades, as computer technology has grown better, they can make these maps with such precision. I mean, they know exactly which voters they're pulling from one district to the next. It is almost guaranteed to work when they do these. Brianna, I wanted to ask you though, like we talked about Newsom and Hochul and California and New York. Did Democrats preemptively disarm in both of those states? They have independent redistricting commissions, which is what every state should have, mind you. These states are doing the right thing. And now, when, I mean, you might have to throw down and play dirty with these guys, they've made it so they can't. Did we shoot ourselves in the foot by being, I don't know, too good, obeying the rules, doing the right thing?
I mean, it could, but I would say that those commissions can change and they can make decisions to change it and see these are people on these commissions. And I think that I would hope that they would see what's happening and see that it's really our only good option if the red states are going to gerrymander to try to get rid of all of the blue states or all of the blue seats. I think that we have to fight fire with fire at this point. But yes, I do think that it's a concern that they have these commissions. Are they going to be able to get around the commission to help save democracy, essentially? Because that's what we're fighting for. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It is democracy versus fascism. So, and that's really what it is. So I would hope that the committees and commissions would see that and see that this is maybe a necessary evil for a little bit. But overall, I think gerrymandering needs to end nationwide.
And this was part of the For the People Act, which Democrats had on the table after the Biden election in 2021. That was like their top order of business, and they couldn't get it through. It would have, eliminated gerrymandering nationwide, would have put in all sorts of lovely voting rights protections, and we couldn't get it over the line. This, I think, if Democrats are ever able to pry power from the Republican hands, this is something we're going to have to do right away. So until then, we find ourselves in this like race to the bottom, right? Oh, Texas is like, all right, well, we're gonna steal 5 seats. California's like, okay, well, we'll steal 5 seats. And New York's like, maybe we can get a couple too. So then the Republicans are like, oh, okay, well, if you're going to do that, then we're going to get some more. And that leads us to this week in Indiana, where our good friend of the pod, Vice President J.D. Vance, visited the Hoosier State this week, meeting with Governor Mike Braun and some of the Republican legislators here in the state to talk about redrawing our maps. Now, Indiana is already gerrymandered 7-2. There are 7 Republicans in our House caucus and 2 Democrats, Andre Carson in the 7th out of Indianapolis and Frank Mervan in the 1st up in Northwest Indiana. Apparently, Republicans have a map. We haven't seen the map yet, but they could theoretically call a special session and pass a map to, at the very least, draw Mervan out of his district. And theoretically, they could go really big and try to go 9-0, though it would be exceedingly difficult. And they might have to dilute their power in those other districts too far. So Braun said in his press conference with Vance after their meeting that, quote, we discussed a number of issues, and I was pleased to highlight some of the great things happening in Indiana. A nothing statement, right? He gives no tell which way he's really leaning. Apparently, the legislators are not super interested in this. One of the reasons may be that these quote-unquote fiscal conservatives would object to the special session costing Indiana taxpayers over $500,000. Maybe that's their reason. Maybe they think it's offensive Who knows? Let me come back to Scott. Have I been with you recently? Let's come back to Scott.
Yep.
Is Indiana going to go through with this?
I think Indiana is going to go through with it. We have proven that we are Trump's special little friend, and Braun has, as far as I can tell, zero ethics. So does Beckwith. So why wouldn't they? And I will note that when JD Vance showed up, he was roundly booed at the building. I know the protesters who were there at the sit-in, and they did not even allow them close to JD Vance. It was shameful.
Yeah, well, but hopefully he got the message and he heard loud and clear that the people of Indiana are not happy about this.
I don't think he cares. I don't think anyone in the administration cares. They're not concerned about re-election because they're rigging the game.
And this has been a long-standing feature of Indiana politics, So this week, former Governor Mitch Daniels came out against this gerrymandering effort, saying it would be just wrong. People there have a right to pick the person they want. My sense is you'd have to torture the lines to eke out another one somehow. It would be so overtly partisan that I would hope they would abstain from it. If redistricting were to happen, Daniels said, quote, the ideal ought to be districts which make geographical sense and cross as few jurisdictional lines as possible. End quote. So, okay, Ross, first thoughts? Mitch Daniels, good for him, right?
Well, I mean, so the thing about gerrymandering is obviously both sides have done it, and until nobody does it, honestly, everybody should do it. That's my opinion in raw politics. As long as anybody does it, and that's one of the things that was discussed earlier about these commissions. That is all well and good. I've been against them. Not because I don't think we should have them and they should be fair, but if everybody's not doing it, why are you unilaterally disarming? And it's not only that they have these commissions, but these commissions have a mandate to create districts with a certain percentage. So they legally can't do the right thing in this instance of fighting fire with fire. California, New York will have to have a special election to oust the commission and let the governor and let the legislature pick the district. So we've put ourselves in a bad spot. I mean, the other thing is, again, if we go back to the 2000 map where we had a Democratic governor, we had a Democratic majority in the House, in the state legislature, House of Representatives, but we had a Republican majority, 2-1 majority in the Senate. Go back and look at it sometime. That 2000 map is the most gerrymandered thing you ever saw. I mean, it is looks like a jigsaw puzzle. So the 2010 map, which Daniels oversaw, favors Republicans, but it is actually less gerrymandered than the 2000 map. The interesting thing to me going forward with this, and why it might not happen in Indiana, is it's very hard to predict these trends. If you go back to that 2010 map, they put the northern quarter of Marion County into the 5th. Why? Because that was suburban and wealthy, and they wanted that in the 5th. Well, by the time we got to 2020, holy cow, we don't want suburban voters in the 5th. So they took that out, put it back in Andre's district, and then put the southern quarter of Marion County into the 6th. So trends change, and if you're trying to gerrymander and say, we would like to, in 2010, we want as many suburban Republicans as we can get. And then you get to now, we want rural voters. We don't want suburban voters. So if you start thinking about it, I think all of these people care about saving their own necks. That's really at the end of the day all they really care about. And the only fairness, cost, it's about saving their own necks. So I think if they start looking at it and when smart people start explaining it to them, the more you tinker with the map, the more the more uncertainty you have in the future. And that's the reason it might not happen here.
Yeah, and like again, these redistricting efforts are only supposed to take place every 10 years after a census where we have more accurate data about population trends and who's moving where it's growing, where it's shrinking, and whatnot. You mentioned the 2000 map and how it was gerrymandered towards Democrats, and but also like from 2000 to 2010 we actually had balance in the state house. Like Democrats had representation, kind of commensurate with their support in the state, as opposed to now where, we're getting 44 something percent out of the statewide vote in statewide races, but we only have 22% of the congressional seats. And we have even less than that in the state house, and the state senate are horribly gerrymandered down at that level. You mentioned the 2010 election, and I think this is kind of the most overlooked election in our generation. If you remember 2008, there was so much optimism, especially on our side of the aisle, with Obama coming in, talking about big progressive change. Maybe we were going to, get universal health care. Remember all that stuff that we talked about? Hope, change. Great. The backlash that followed to the Obama election, a lot of racism in there. Also, a lot of the Tea Party was an AstroTurf movement. It was funded by big donors. It was not grassroots. But that 2010 red wave election that followed introduced such gerrymandering at such scale in Indiana, in Texas, in all these places. It was part of a coordinated effort. The project was called Red Map, Redistricting Majority Project. It was a Republican scheme, basically developed by Karl Rove and Ed Gillespie. And after that census, after those elections, with the increase in technology and the map making software, that election really made it become so precise that elected officials could pick their voters. And we've been digging out of this ever since, right? Like Brianna in 2010, the Republicans, took over our state house. They gerrymandered themselves nice, safe House districts, nice, safe Senate districts, and nice, safe congressional districts. And we've found ourselves in a hole since then that it's almost impossible to dig out of. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it feels like. I mean, we've been fighting for different districts. I mean, you look at the 5th district, right? Like Victoria Sparks is like horrible. She said, well, everybody dies and that's just fine. And she just doesn't listen. And she's Ukrainian, but supports Russia. I don't know. But like no one has been able to unseat her. So it's digging out of places like that where it's these people are not serving Hoosiers. They're just not, these Republican representatives, and they're not listening and they're not showing up to these town halls, but yet people keep voting for them. Why? Because we're gerrymandered and people are voting for a letter and not the person. So I think that is the struggle in Indiana, is that we are so gerrymandered that it's hard to overcome this inherent bias that people in Indiana have towards Democrats. Indiana's put out so much propaganda about Democrats being evil and wanting to unalive babies and things like that, and things that are just grossly untrue and false, but people believe it. So we're fighting from years of brainwashing on top of gerrymandering, and it's a very hard fight.
Yeah, and yeah, you've got this like stack of techniques layered on top of each other. You know, the gerrymandering and the propaganda, and then the way the gerrymandering works. Like obviously, there's the inherent advantage built into it, but then you also get the depression of enthusiasm for the other side. Like, oh man, we can't win this seat. Why do I even go vote? You know, and then we get it's hard to recruit candidates in these seats because, well, you know, why would I if I vote if I'm just going to get my ass kicked? You know, no one wants to sign up for that, so it's really hard. And Scott, it's just like this self-defeating circle or downward spiral of unprogress, let's say. Yeah.
Yep, it is. And ultimately, government is there to represent the people. Okay. And we know what happened in 1776 when we felt that the British government was not representing us. They keep doing this, they keep pushing the people. At some point, we end up back in the same kinds of situations, right? History, you know, as Santayana said, if you don't know your history, it's bound to repeat. And that seems like the Republicans do not know their history and they do not care.
Yeah. So, Ross, you've run for the state house in gerrymandered district. What's that like to go out into these communities where you know you don't really have a whole hell of a lot of shot? Are the other Democrats in your district that you talk to just disheartened? They don't see the point?
Well, yeah. So, you know, when I was talking before about the gerrymandered map that we helped draw, I'm talking about congressional districts only. The state house map has been gerrymandered in favor of Republicans for a long, long, long time, and that's because of the control of the Senate that they have had in the state house for a long, long, long time. So Indiana at the state house level is the most gerrymandered state. Many of the groups that study these things point to Indiana as the most gerrymandered state. And as you said, it also generally every year is least in voter turnout,
Yes.
if not last in the bottom three. And that is no accident, right? Because um, in these gerrymandered districts, um, at least at that point, you know, they're created mathematically to have more voters than the other. And basically the only way that you can be competitive in a gerrymandered district is if you have the massive turnout of the minority and extremely low turnout of the majority. And that is kind of a perfect storm. Some of them it's just impossible. Look, if you're in an 80-20 district, that's mathematically never going to happen. But if you're in a 70-30, 65, 35, that's where those people who are running for office have a fighting chance. And that's the one thing that's interesting about this next election is Indiana. We don't have a presidential election. We don't have a Senate election. The top of the ticket is a congressman. Trump's not going to be here. He's not going to be here for Jefferson Shreve. He's not going to, and part of that's because of gerrymandering. They don't think they're going to lose any of these seats, right?
Right.
So you're not going to have money pumped in here. They're not going to spend money. Trump's not going to be here like he was for Braun in 18, running against an incumbent senator. It's not going to be like 2020 where he's there for Braun running for governor. So there is a possibility for super low turnout among Trump Republicans who are only focused on Trump and very little else. If Trump's not paying attention, he's not on the ballot, there's a potential for low turnout. But that's really the only way to beat gerrymandering is turnout numbers. And it, yeah, look, it's very disheartening for people who are running for office. But the last thing I would say is obviously those demographics change and cities change.
Mhm.
You look at Georgia, Georgia's considered a purple state. I mean, it is not because a bunch of rednecks in Macon decided to become Democrats. It's because a whole bunch of people moved to Atlanta, and the bigger Atlanta gets, you know, Cobb, Cobb County. I mean, that's where Newt Gingrich is from, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, Hamilton County, Indiana, at one time, these are the most Republican places on earth. But guess what? As the city grows, the people who are moving in are not rednecks. They're upwardly mobile people. They're younger people. They're demographics that help us. So that's the hope in the long run. And that's the last thing I would say about that gerrymander. You try to divide up 7 Marion County, and yeah, you might get a short-term gain, and you might knock out Andre Carson, right? But in the long term, you're going to create 4 super competitive districts, and as the city becomes more expansive, as those donut counties become Democratic, you may create 4 Democratic districts, and that's not an exaggeration. So, as a political junkie, you almost welcome that. Like, bring it on. Give me a piece of Marion County in every one of those districts. Let's see what happens.
Makes me think of a couple things. It's like, yeah, you might get those those 4 districts that lean a little bit more Democratic. They'll just change the lines again in 5 years if they have to, right? But the way gerrymandering works, besides the obvious, is the depression, the feeling of hopelessness that you get in these rigged districts. And it is still so important to go out there, even if you are going to lose 80-20. Well, those 20 that you get, also, those votes are also going to the top of the ticket, right? They're not just voting in that state district. They're voting at the Senate level, at the congressional level, at the governor level, or whatever, the presidential level. So those votes still count somewhere. And in the way of looking at politics is like a team sport. That's why it's so important to have folks up and down the ballot. Brianna, I will say this, and I said this last week. If anything, the fact that they're doing all this gerrymandering gives me hope that they're just going to try and steal the election the old-fashioned way, and not by, I don't know, declaring martial law or canceling the election entirely or some Russian weird authoritarian shit. Am I like being too naive?
So I don't know. So I go both ways on this because sometimes I feel the same way. Sometimes I feel, okay, they're scared. They're talking about redistricting. They know they're unpopular and they're scared. So that's, to me, seems like a good thing. However, we are in an age where we just talked about someone hacking into systems. And I don't think that it's impossible for someone to hack into our election systems, especially with who's in charge currently. And especially if they make them recertify all the election machines like they're talking about. I think that we have to have more concern over the security of our election machines this upcoming election, and maybe not as much about the gerrymandering is more where my concern is lying, because I do see that as, yeah, if they do split up Indianapolis, we're going to get more congressional districts that are competitive. That's great. But will they be competitive? Will it be a real election? Or are we going to be taking out of another person's playbook where it's just the illusion of a free and fair election?
Yeah, this is the competitive authoritarianism model that they employ. In Hungary, especially, that's kind of the model I think Republicans are going for here. But also, Russia does the same thing, but they are a lot less cute about it. I mean, Putin wins every re-election like 98-2 or something. I mean, that is not a real free and fair election. I'm at the point where I think we need to have our elections supervised by like the UN and international monitors, just like you hear about in these developing countries where democracies are just emerging and they have to go in and supervise these votes to make sure they're free and fair. I'm not sure we're going to have free and fair elections going forward. And that is a really, really bummer of a place to leave this thing. But I want to give each of you guys a chance to just shamelessly pitch yourself and tell the good folks where they can find you. Scott, I'm going to start with you.
Nothing to pitch this time. Just hanging out.
All right.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Ross, where can the good folks find you online?
Well, you can find the Bartholomew County Democratic Party at barthdems.org. I'm pitching electoral politics. My message to activists, and I'm one of them. If you have committed yourself to go to a No Kings rally, if you've committed yourself to join Indivisible or any of the other protest groups, that's terrific, and keep doing that. But at the end of the day, a protest isn't going to change who's running the country. It's electoral politics. You have to take that energy and accept the fact, and you may not like everything that the Democratic Party does, but we're not fascists. So you've got a choice. So I encourage everybody who doesn't like the government that we have to get involved in your local Democratic Party and fight for change. And, we're doing it over here every day.
And I will add to what Ross said: if you don't like the way that don't like things that the Democratic Party is doing, get yourself involved with the Democratic Party and change the way they're doing things.
Amen, brother.
Brianna, you have a fantastic online presence, and I bet the people already know where to find you. But if they don't, where can they see you at?
So my biggest following is on TikTok, but I am also on Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, and recently Substack as the Recovered Republican. All of my content is trying to keep people informed, especially about Indiana politics, and trying to encourage people to get involved in the Democratic Party. I am a recovered Republican and have lived in Indiana my entire life, so I have a unique perspective of what the Republicans are thinking and how to combat that. And I talk about how you can have these conversations. And I also do interviews with people who are running for Democratic seats. So if you want to know more about who's running, follow me there and you'll see those interviews. The full interviews are always posted to YouTube.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Brianna Newhart, Ross Thomas, Scott Johnson, my panel today. You've all been great. I appreciate you. In the meantime, everybody, be sure you are subscribed to Project Next at projectnextindiana.com, on Facebook at Project Next Indiana, Instagram, YouTube, somewhere else, Project Next Movement. Y'all know how to use Google. Me, I am at HoosLeft.us, and you can find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft, as well as on the other social media sites at ScottROG78. Until next week, this has been Who's Left This Week. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.